Welcome to episode 16 of Auction Watch, the show where we look at some forthcoming properties coming up for sale at auction. I'm joined as usual by Jay Howard and Omar Mehmet. So what we're going to look at today, we're off to Southend on Sea to look at a 3-bedroom semi. Then we're back to Kilburn in London for a shop and uppers, a bit of commercial action, and also a shop above a shop. What am I talking about? A flat above a shop in Croyden. If you're new to this channel, subscribe, hit the bell icon. We release loads of videos each and every week. Smash that like button, comment, tell us what you think. Do you agree or disagree with our analysis and comments? If you've got further questions, just put them in the comments below. So, Southend on Sea, very nice seaside town.
Excellent.
What have we got?
So this is a 3-bedroom semi-detached house for improvement. Postcode is SS1. I'm guessing that's central in Southend on Sea somewhere. Guided at 280,000 plus. And the property is a little bit tired, but it's not falling apart. Basic kitchen. It looks like it could do with some modernisation, but it's a 1930 structure. And if you read the description, nothing really, too out of the ordinary here. It's just a standard house. So I picked this one out because just to see what the opportunity is here. And I think that as more and more areas are becoming Article 4 for HMO restriction to convert from C3 to C4 HMOs, this particular area is still you can do that under PD. So this particular property is going to attract your owner occupiers, the people that want to just put it straight into a buy to let, but it will also attract the investors that are looking for a bit more of a yield, and perhaps we'll do the whole 6-metre rear extension under 56-day prior notification, loft conversion under PD, and convert it up into a 6-bed all-en-suite HMO where they'll get a really good yield. And I think that a lot of the councils now are closing these C4 PD rights, and they're trying to restrict people from doing that, implementing the Article 4. So I think there's a bit of a window of an opportunity in Southend, and I think this particular property could go well for that type of strategy. And it could also be a family home, but it's guided well enough to have the margin in it.
That's what I was thinking. I was wondering whether this is if you look at the one next door, it's a family home. They drop the curb and use the font as a driveway. Yeah. Is it better just to keep it really simple, new bathroom, kitchen, flip it as a family home?
You don't like HMO, so you're obviously going to take that stance.
You're against poor judgment on this one, because neither of us are big HMO fans.
Well, I don't mind the odd HMO, but
it just requires too much work for me.
No,
I think an owner occupier is going to pay the most rent for this. I'll tell you for why. Yeah. One, it's got fantastic links into London. So whilst it's more than a drivable distance, it is a very easy train overground commutable distance. Yeah. It has an airport, which may not be that significant for most people, but actually for being this far out of London, it's decent, it's good. It's under a mile away from the seaside. So for a small family to have that recreation space, growing up by the seaside and the environment there, I think is brilliant. I think people who are looking to move out of London, maybe they're in London flats, maybe they spent COVID in a flat thinking, right, pulling our hair out. Maybe they got a flat, maybe Walthamstow or something like that. It's worth £450,000. They're thinking, well, we could commute into work. Yeah. Or maybe they're doing flexi hours or now working mainly from home.
There's a lot of pools, and it's vanilla, and the price is cheap enough to attract the interest. Yeah. But the reason I mention HMO is because these areas are slowly you're not being able to do that anymore. And as a 6-bed all-en-suite HMO, the yield would be much better.
Is there a market for that sort of thing?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we know a few that are operating in Southend, and the room rents down there are sort of £600
I think
a month.
It's great, but actually I would follow, I don't always agree with Ranjan, but I would follow Ranjan's point on this one. I would go in there, you and your team, I would tart it up to the 9s, and I'd
flip it on.
Put it in one of the fancy kind of high-end-ish agency windows and sell it for 400 and something grand.
See,
I don't think you'd have to put
what
much
I'm finding with inflation being at the level it's at,
yeah.
that yield is being chased by UK investors and overseas investors.
Yeah.
And there's a market now to actually convert these into HMOs, set it up, and flog it on to someone who wants an 8% yield.
Fair enough.
And that's what I saw in this.
Yeah.
Because yes, you could do the loft, the single story, drop the curb. It'd probably be worth 450, and you could flog it on and make a tidy little profit. But I think if you did the HMO and you got it rented out and you're bringing in 45 grand a year, you'll get an 8% yield, and you might sell it at 550 to a HMO investor. So that's the kind of angle I was looking at. But we shall see. It's guided low enough to attract a big interest, I think. So I think this would do well at auction.
Is this offered via joint agent? Scroll down, because they're normally quite. No. So this is direct.
And I did check the title. It's not a trader. This is a probate property.
Yes.
So
it's got the marks of a probate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tidy little asset.
So what do you think? Would you buy it, and what will it sell for?
I'd buy it to tart. I'd buy it, tart it up, and then stick it in an agent's window for 6 months.
Yeah.
If I was to do it, but I wouldn't do it. This is not an asset for me to buy.
Ranjan?
No, I'd agree. I think it's much more of a tarted up, because you kind of go with the flow of the other side, which is obviously an owner-occupier family type of vibe, and I think and also on the other side it looks like that sort of owner-occupier vibe. So
I must say there doesn't look like many HMOs on the road, and once you stick in your HMO license application and there's bins galore all over the place, you'll find the neighbours will be a little bit upset with be a bit disgruntled, shall we say,
they may have something to say about
what you've done. And Article 4 will then come in swiftly, but you'll have done it beforehand. So I think this will go for upwards of 320, 330 on the day. But
I mean, the great thing about these sort of houses is they're good old-fashioned, honest houses, well built. It doesn't look as though there's anything structurally wrong with it. There's nothing. When you see these properties on sale with probate and they haven't had any internal decorations done for years, and you look at the walls internally and there's no cracks on any of them, it just shows how well built they are. So it's basically tarting up and modernising and stick it back on the market. So on to our next lot then. We are over in Kilburn. We've got a shop and uppers property. What's all this about?
I like the area. I think we're back into Kilburn. Okay,
there's a bit of a theme here.
But now we've got the commercial with freehold. This is how you do it, Ranjan. This is the proper way to go. This is a big chunk of kit. This is what I would classify as. This is one of the when you're looking at like a building.
Are you getting the red bit at the front as well? What are you buying here?
Sorry.
Where have you gone? Go down to the
change the images, but it's accommodation schedule. Sorry, let me get that up for you. Down here we go. So you've got ground floor shop and first floor, second floor, and third floor not inspected. Tenancy details are here.
Yeah, you've got the whole corner of that building, including that red section there.
Very nice.
And the flats above.
So
you'd be surprised. I was talking to someone before Christmas, and they've got one of their main offices in like a cash and carry kind of building like this. The money these people make in the cash and carry business is actually, he was saying they're probably turning about £30,000 a month. You think
and the rest. And some of them have got 24-hour licenses to operate. It does say in the description that 3 reversionary ground rents. Is that in addition to some residential that you're acquiring?
So because the flats are sold off above. Right, so you're buying this on the commercial, and it's decent on a yield play. But the beauty of it is actually 3 of those flats were sold off 30 odd years ago. I imagine they're on 99-year leases. 30 odd years ago, and they're now getting to 99 years. And now it's going to be worth something. It's not worth something today specifically, but it may be worth something in 3 or 5 years' time.
The next sale...
It's worth something now, because no one can get a mortgage on those flats.
No
one can sell them.
That's true. As soon as the sale.
So the thing is, what I like to do in scenarios like this is if I'm buying something like this, the first thing I do as the freeholder, I send them all a letter.
Yeah.
I can see that your lease is 63 years.
Yeah.
My calculator says you should be paying 80 grand. I'll do 75 if you extend now, and that's 3 times 75. All of a sudden, you're buying the income on that commercial unit for pennies.
That's assuming those flat owners actually have the money and at that time, but
they would remortgage, and their remortgage would cover the majority of that cost.
Sometimes people just don't have the. What I find is these are good, but it's like popcorn. You don't know when it's going to pop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The other interesting play with these, which you should bear in mind, which is to an advantage, is that these leaseholders, they can insist normally that the freeholder sells the freehold to them. Now there is an exemption. If the commercial space occupies more than 25% of the floor space of the building, then they're exempt and they cannot buy the freehold off you.
Yeah.
So basically those leaseholders have to come to you to extend their lease. They don't have the option of making you sell the freehold to them, which makes it, the popcorn will pop. Yeah. You don't know when.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, if you use my strategy, the first thing you do is write to them. If 1 in 3 of them says, my mortgage is, that would make tons of sense to me, then you get 75 grand. That's good. Yes. But then you've also got this flank wall, which is right by the amount of traffic on the Kilburn. I don't know if you've tried to get from one end of the Kilburn High Road to another. At any point in the day, you're at standstill. So I would go to JC Decal or Clear Vision or Clearview, whatever they're called, and I would say, you can have this flank wall. How much would you pay me to put an electronic, because they have to go and get the planning, they have to go and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
But they enter into that lease with you, and I guarantee you on that road, they'd rent it off you for 20 to 30,000 pounds.
I'll take the space off you. We'll just put a "We buy houses, any conditions." Ring this number.
Exactly right, because the income generated from that wall, that's an untapped resource. Because at the moment, all that's there is,
yeah. So this is it's got a new lease that's just been issued. It's been in the same ownership for 40 years.
Yeah.
And the ground floor has a 20-year lease issued from 2021 at a rent of £30,000 with a 5-year.
So they're trying to free up capital. Yeah. They want to keep their business running.
It's like a sale and rent lease back almost, isn't it?
But it's legal because it's commercial, whereas the residential is heavily regulated. Yeah. But in 5 years' time, maybe the rent on it is worth 50 a year instead of 30. But you have the rent review in 5 years' time. You figure it out then.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good asset, and I think it is very well priced.
Yeah. So what's the yield? If it's 450 plus, so are we assuming the reserve is what, 500 or?
Worst case scenario, I think your reserve is 500. Yeah.
Yeah. So at guide, it's if you buy it at the reserve, you're talking sort of 6% yield, something like that.
6%,
but then you've got the ground rents and the possibility of those lease extensions coming in as a bit of a windfall as and when they do.
This is a busy high road as well,
and the advertising space that you mentioned.
Yeah, because you think at one side of this high road, you're in like a Maida Vale kind of. You're in that end, and on the other side, you're heading right into town.
And free groceries for the rest of your life with the relationship you'll have with the tenant.
What do you think, Ranjan? You love.
I wouldn't go in there for any lemons. I think the leasehold revisionary stuff. I've bought a few things like this, and I've always treated them as a bonus. Do the figures based on the rest of the building, because those popcorns will pop. But sometimes, I've got one that we're doing at the moment actually, where it's about 63 years on the lease. We've negotiated about 40k for the lease renewal and all of that. But that was bought more than 8 years ago. Yeah. So you just don't know when those are going to pop. So those are just nice little bonuses that pop up here and there.
I would pay £500,000 for this asset, and I wouldn't blink at the thought of it at 500,000 because the yield is still, for that part of London, fairly decent on commercial. Yeah. You have your popcorn element of the 3 short lease flats, which you may be able to manipulate earlier on.
Yeah.
and you have that unrealised potential of that wall. Look at the bloody size of that wall.
So what would the yield work out at 500?
30 grand divided by 500 is 6% yield.
6%.
So you're getting 6%, and you've got
and you've got potentially. I mean, I don't know what the extension cost is on there, but I would say at 60 years, that's easily 80 to 100,000 pounds.
Really, yeah.
I think you're right. There's another commercial property angle which I think a lot of people miss. The way the market seems to price commercial let properties is they don't really like. I mean, they tend to. The brands are higher valued than the mom and pops, but there's gold in the good mom and pops which have a solid business that are just going to be there forever.
They've been sitting there.
Exactly, and that sort of fruit and veg in a highly densely populated area, they've got trade all the time. They're not going to go out of business. As long as people are eating apples, they'll be in business.
Correct.
So from that point of view, although the market would value that at a higher yield, I would take some sort of individual knowledge on that business, how long they've been there, the products they're selling, their goodwill, and kind of value it at a little bit lesser yield.
And obviously, if after 10 years they decided to remove themselves completely, you'd split that commercial 7 which ways from Sunday, because it's a big chunk of kit.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be a conversation for at the point of purchase, but it is.
But they want to stay, right? Because they've issued themselves a 20-year lease. They're serious, right? They don't want to leave. So
I would argue the terms of their lease are probably quite favourable in terms of the premium that they'll be paying a year.
Yeah.
But if you wait 5 years and at that rent review date, whether they stay or go or whatever, the chances are you're probably going to increase the yield at that 5-year point.
But you would want to always check a commercial lease that's been drafted by the tenant.
Yes.
To make sure that the terms are favourable for you to impose rent reviews and the like later on.
Absolutely.
So what do you guys think?
I think you're right. I think it will go for. Well, I'm assuming that the reserve is at 500, 10% above the guide. I think it will sell above that. I'm not sure how much. I think. The ground rent is difficult to value because of the popcorn effect that we're talking about. But some people will see that and think, well, that's a nice windfall. But if you're going to be sophisticated, you should be basing it just on the yield and seeing that as a bonus. So would you buy it at 5? You would, wouldn't you?
I'd buy it.
Would you buy it at 5.25?
I would go as far as to say, as a black and white asset, freehold, building in NW6, spitting distance to the train station, I would pick this up on a 5% yield. I would go that far. I wouldn't feel too comfortable going at 600,000.
Yeah.
But I would be anywhere between 500 without a question. I wouldn't even blink. That'll be the bid I'd go at. But I would be anywhere between 5 and 6 as a boundary. I'd be very comfortable.
Well, let's see what it goes for. Would you buy it? Let us know in the comments below. So what have we got next? We've got a Croyden flat above a shop, and I think this is interesting for discussional purposes. We've got a vacant 2-bedroom flat. These folks have submitted a planning application to basically extend the thing and split it to create 2 multiple flats out of this larger one. I think the thing that distresses me about this is that, there are a couple of things. One, they haven't got the permission yet. And secondly, when they do get the permission, they've still got to go to the freeholder for permission because it's a leasehold property. So there are a couple of hurdles there. And I wonder whether a lot of people will look at this and think 80 grand, they will think of the vision that's being presented here as, hey, I'm going to convert this into 3 flats, and think they're going to get it. But I'm not sure. I think there are just too many hurdles to cross to get to that finish line.
I think if you haven't dealt with freeholder consent before, back in the day, I used to buy 2-bedroom flats, then move the kitchen into the living room and go from 2 to 3. You need freeholder consent for minor alterations on things like that. If you're not used to it, then it can be a really long, drawn out and expensive process. Normally the main people that win there are the solicitors. But if you understand freeholder consent, if you turn around and say, I'm planning on doing this, you're going to get an extra flat, which means you're going to get extra service charge and ground rent. You're going to get an additional potential for reversion. You need to frame it correctly. And I'm going to give you £10,000 for the benefit of granting me this consent. Those are ways that you can really grease the wheels to make this successful. But if you're not aware of that, you're gonna be in a difficult situation.
I think that's a really good way of trying to frame it. But the issue is, it's who is the freeholder. That's the issue, right? Because the framework is fantastic, but the freeholder could say, absolutely not. I want 40 odd grand to give you consent to create this flat. And it feels, for me, there's a few things that stick out. One, I know I keep talking about lot numbers, I apologise for that, but this is lot 38A. It's been put in the auction after the catalogue has probably been lotted. So someone slotted this in. It feels like there's hope value that's trying to be created that may or may not ever actually get planning permission. And you've got the potential to have a 1-bed and a 2-bed. But should that not materialise, or should the freeholder want too much of a premium, you're actually left with a flat above some undesirable shops that's non-mortgageable, that probably isn't going to be worth a lot more than you paid for it after you've refurbed it. So that's my gut feeling, but it may be that I'm being really negative there, but it's the hope value.
Right. Now, the thing I don't understand, I mean, it'll be interesting to understand the story behind why this is in the auction, because I agree with what you said about the strategies for kind of negotiating with the freeholder, but that is very hard to do within the auction timetable. And when I've kind of done these sort of complicated arrangements, they've normally been either private treaty or through an agent, where there's a little bit more time on your hands to negotiate all these things.
Does this stack as I'm buying a 2-bedroom flat that I'm going to tart up and rent out at that price? Because if it does, then it works. And if the only way it stacks is if you've got the 2 flats, the 2-bed and the 1-bed, then I think you're in trouble. But one thing that this is another lot that gives me mixed signals. They've done no works, which is trader-esque. They've submitted an application. Scroll down to the planning section, because there's not even a planning section. So it means that they've submitted it and they haven't even had it.
It's probably not validated
It's not
yet.
even validated.
But you'd want to check that stuff out, right?
And look on. But then the other thing that really confuses me is they've offered a 6-week completion. You don't. That's not a trader thing to do.
No.
So it's another one where it's giving off different signals as to what to do. But actually, this is interesting because, what you would be doing is if you owned the freehold of that building, which someone has obviously taken one commercial unit and they split it into 2. And now they're taking one flat and they're trying to split it into 2. So you can see that if the person who owned the whole thing was the person who's doing this, then you can see that there's some congruency and they've maybe just run out of capital, run out of steam, or whatever it may be. And maybe there's potential for it. But there seems to be a lot hanging in the air that makes me think I'm not sure about whether even the flat refurbed and the aggravation of doing that is going to be much of a return on that 80k. It probably is going to be worth more than the 80k, but
I mean, there's a few good things going for it, as much as we've slated it. You've got its own front door to the uppers. The upstairs is a reasonable size. It's cheap at Guide for Croyden, right? You can't buy a 2-bed flat for 80 grand in Croyden with a 145-year lease, even above a shop. So at Guide it's cheap, even a bit above Guide it's cheap. But I feel that there's a few telltale things that are kind of slotted in, hope value, really low Guide. It's almost sort of creating this hope value that someone's trying to achieve 160 grand for this sale.
If you put your finance hat on,
would I buy this?
No. How fundable is it? Because
it's
downstairs you've got your lick fingers, which is
and
probably
you've got a kebab shop to the right,
and you've got a barber shop, clips, cuts, right?
So
you've got every flavour of this is going to be really difficult to work with.
As you said before, everything is fundable, okay? And there will be someone that will lend on this that you're going to pay through the nose for.
It will be high interest rate. Buying it at a lesser price. Now, one of the learning points I put this in for was that this is being sold on a ton of hope value. And I believe what you should do is sort of say, right, forget about the hope value. What's your fallback position?
Yes.
And the fallback position on this makes the 80 grand seem very, very steep, in my view, because it's leasehold. It's any money you put in is probably going to be stuck in there, because I think your funding options are going to be limited because of all the issues that we've discussed. But that is my worry. I like propositions where, yes, there's hope value, but the fallback position is fundable, it's lettable, it's investable, and it will grow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think...
Further investigation on the planning, perhaps.
Yes.
Let's see if that's validated. How does it look? What's the size of... Are you creating...
Square footage.
It's all... But I mean, on a pure yield basis, if you were buying this as a cash investment and you could pick it up at 80... What's that flat going to rent for there in Croyden? It's got to be 1,200 plus a month, right? A 2-bed flat above. It's a big flat, isn't it? It's across the whole of the top there.
And you're good to go.
It's a good yield.
Years plus.
It's a good yield, isn't it? In that sense. So,
and for something like this, where it's the only flat in the block, the ground rent is going to be 100 quid, 50 quid.
Yeah.
And the chances are there's going to be next to no service charge. If there is, it's going to be menial.
Yeah.
And then it just comes down to insurance, which is normal.
Yeah. I think you could do something with it if it was cheap enough. At guide, maybe just above. But other than that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, good one to discuss.
So, would you go for this? Is it a bargain, or do you want to stay clear of it? Let us know in the comments below. That's it for this episode of Auction Watch. Do smash that like button. And thanks so much, Jay, and thanks so much, Omar. See you guys next time. High streets across the land are changing forever. Basically, there's an oversupply of retail premises. Shops are closing down, more are going to close down in the future. The government know this, and that's why they're introducing a light touch planning system which allows small developers to easily repurpose these buildings to residential use under a light touch planning regime called permitted development. Now, this is going to be the biggest revolution and the biggest change and the biggest opportunity for property investors that I've ever seen. And this is all coming into effect on 1st of August. So you need to know what's happening and what properties to look for to take advantage of these opportunities so that you can get in there and take that first mover advantage. I've got a 90-minute free masterclass to get you ready for August the 1st. Make sure you join me, click the link below. Whether you're a beginner or expert, we'll get you started.